From history to the here and now, Donald Trump calling out the Obama administration for its preference for Muslim refugees over Christians. Here's what he had to say at the Values Voters Summit last week.
By the way, President Obama has allowed Syrian refugees to pour into our country at unbelievable rates. And Hillary Clinton wants to allow 550% more. But it's almost impossible to get a Christian in from Syria.
Now understand this, President Obama continues to welcome even more Muslim refugees. In a statement issued today, which is a Muslim holiday, the president has this statement from the White House, quoting now, "As a nation, we remain committed to welcoming the stranger with empathy and an open heart, from the refugee who flees war-torn lands to the immigrant who leaves home in search of a better life." Would that sentiment also included Christians? Let's welcome in from Newsmax Washington, president of the Kairos Company, Johnnie Moore. Johnnie, the best-selling author of Defying ISIS, Preserving Christianity in the Place of Its Birth and in Your Own Backyard. John, here's the math as I understand it. More than 11,000 Syrian refugees have entered our country to this point, but less than half of 1% are Christian. Why is that?
It's because if you support Christians who have been the recipients of genocide in the Middle East, you're called Islamophobic, and it's just incomprehensible. I mean, how could you be accused of Islamophobia just by raising up the banner and saying how many more Christians are going to die in the Middle East? I mean, JD, let's just be honest. Like, the Obama-Clinton administration has been the party to the most systematic dismantling of religious freedom in this country, and they have sat on their hands while hundreds of thousands, if not millions and millions of Christians have been displaced and killed. It is very, very serious. 56 Christians in over 10,000 Syrian Muslims. And that doesn't mean you're anti-Islamic. Everybody needs help. But it's not immoral to give special treatment to those facing a special threat.
Now, it has been said that actions speak louder than words, but you have a word that you want to see incorporated into the dictionary, Christophobia. Define that for us.
Well, if I'm going to be accused of Islamophobia just by, speaking up for Christians, or, if someone's accused of homophobia or xenophobia, well, what about people that are anti-Christian? I mean, what contribution have we made to history? We created the education system in this country. I'm sitting in Washington, D.C. You need a chisel and a hammer to take the Bible verses off the buildings, in this town. And so, let's call it what it is. If you're anti-Christian, henceforth, you are guilty of Christophobia. You're a Christophobe. You're exhibiting Christophobic behavior. And we're going to shame you with it. That's what we're going to do.
And it follows,
as Christians.
Let me just ask you this. In your opinion, is President Obama Christophobic?
Of course he is. Of course he is. And and everyone else, that attempts to dismantle the foundation of this country and not speak up for the vulnerable Christians around the world. JD, without question, this is the worst Christian persecution that we have at least seen in our modern era and maybe in 2,000 years of Christian history. By the time this program is over, at least a Christian has been killed. Hundreds of more have been marginalized, put in prison, tortured, beaten, many of those in countries that we call our allies. And the United States of America has a moral obligation to speak up, and we're not doing it, and it starts at the top. Christophobia.
Well, it is worth noting that earlier, Dan Stein of the Federation for American Immigration Reform was on Newsmax TV discussing the Obama administration's approach to the Syrian refugees case. Let's listen to Dan's take, then I'll ask for your reaction.
She's also basically saying, I'm going to ramp up dramatically the number of refugees and so-called refugee admissions and bend the law and creatively take control from Congress of who can come in and who won't. And it's a very serious constitutional crisis.
A friendly amendment to that, obviously, he's discussing Hillary, who arguably is lining up for Mr. Obama's third term. Despite all her talk about social justice and awakening to that movement as a high school Christian, is she likewise Christophobic?
Yeah, it's social justice for everyone but the Christians. And by the way, I'm not anti-refugee. I've spent as much time and energy helping Muslim refugees as anybody else. But I just believe that Christians who have faced the threat of genocide, like Yazidis, ought to get special treatment. And I can tell you, you remember, JD, we talked about it again and again. When we were trying to get a genocide declaration that passed Congress unanimously, passed the British Parliament unanimously, the State Department that was overseen by Hillary Clinton and then overseen by John Kerry stopped us every step of the way. And I got to tell you, you don't have to have a Harvard degree to understand what has happened in the Middle East. And all you got to do, get on an airplane, fly to Erbil, go 2 blocks out of the airport and ask the first person that you talk to what happened to Christians in the Middle East. The fact is, 5 years ago, there were 2 million Christians in Syria. Now there are 400,000. The fact is, less than 10 years ago, there were 1.5 million in Iraq. There are fewer than a couple 100,000. And you know what I just discovered, JD? I did a research project all around the world. The situation in the northeast of Nigeria is worse than in Syria. There is a global war on Christians, and we got to do more about it.
And if
you don't do something about it, you're guilty of Christophobia.
Understood. And we will incorporate that into vocabulary as well as into the dictionary, I hope. Sad that it's come to that. Johnnie Moore, tonight from Newsmax Washington. John, thank you so much. Again, his book, Defying ISIS. And we thank Johnnie Moore for his thoughts.